Kel
Okay, good morning.
changed his class to learn Torah. Your class.
But I'll probably leave before you're done.
Okay, Wednesday. We end chapter 7. Chapter 7 is the climax of this second book of Tanya, page 76. Yesterday we were introduced to two big terms in Chassidus. One is Soviv Kalamin, which means Hashem as he transcends the world, or he relates to the world in a transcendent way, meaning the particulars are not relevant. They don't make an impression on God at that level. So it's not that he's not encompassing. It's everywhere, this presence of God, but it's there in a way, in the way that that any particulars make no difference. There's no differentiation. Then we said there's another term of God's manifestation called Mamalik Lamnim, the way God does fill up every individual creation according to its ability, according to its need. So the sun has a very tapered energy to its life force, to its needs, and a tiny pebble has its life force, we say life force, we mean giving it existence.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, if it's all God and God is one, why is one a fiery ball in the sky, one's a little pebble?
Mm-hmm.
Because the desire to have finite world and things means everything needs its own level of specifications, which means there's an energy that is changing for every different thing, depending on its difference. Okay, so I'm sorry, we're on page 76. Yeah. So now we'll talk a little more about Mamali Kalam and this idea of God. Meaning, before we're like, how does God exist? Now we're like, how does the world exist? And we're like, the world exists because of Tzimtzum. We explained that on one hand, we also explained Tzimtzum, the way the Hasidic masters were defined, that it's not literal. God never left anywhere. It's just, from our perspective, God wants us to have awareness and consciousness.
Wow. So,
from our perspective, there seems to be a difference between, energies and good and bad and all that, but that's from our perspective. It's almost like, think of a story in your mind and imagine that you could create the characters had a perspective. Right? You're thinking of a story. There's a little Red Riding Hood or something. You're thinking in your mind the story. I forgot the story. There's a wolf, I think.
Oh, yeah, right.
Anyways, there's a witch or a wolf.
Something.
I don't know.
Wolf. There's a wolf.
Wolf. Okay.
Where have you been, Rabbi? It's a wolf.
It's a wolf. Okay, I forgot. I mixed up my Grimm's fairy tales.
I forgot the story.
I'm mixing up of like Little Red Riding Hood and Hansel and Gretel. There's a witch. Whatever the case. Think of all the characters of any story you want, and then imagine those characters. You could create those characters have. They have a perspective. Now they're only existing in your mind, but imagine you could make a feat that those characters, Little Red Riding Hood, could have a perspective. That's kind of, I think, what the metaphor for us is. God, we're all within God's mind. Yet God wants these characters, us, and not just us, all of creation, to have perspective, to have some sort of real life, real existence that we perceive according to that existence. which is a limited, which is limited. It sees things in whatever your ability is. Okay, so that explains how, at the same time, nothing has independent value other than being part of the author's mind. Okay, so how does God create the specifics? The differentiation of creatures. So he says, for the source of the life force is the breath of the mouth of the Holy One, blessed be He. It becomes enclosed in the 10 utterances of the Torah.
Wow.
So this is a big deal. How do we? So what's God's mechanism? Well, it's got the breath of God that is then differentiated into the 10 utterances through the speech of God. Now, the breath of his mouth could have diffused without end and limit and created worlds infinite in their quantity and quality and given them life forever, unlike their present state in which they are limited in all these respects. And in this corporeal world, all of whose beings are limited and finite would not have been created at all.
There might be something wrong with my watch today.
The reason why the breath of his mouth, if God didn't contract it, which is the trick of how we have specification, we have differentiation and finitude because of that. And had God not done the tzimtzum, the contraction, we would have not been limited. We would have been patently infinite in our way.
Whoa.
For just as the Holy and Blessed Be is called infinite, so are all his attributes and actions infinite. For it's a famous line in the Zohar, he and his attributes are one. Meaning the life force that emanates from his attributes, kindness, mercy, etc., and his other holy attributes emanate from them through their being clothed in the breath of his mouth, which is the final sphere of Malchus, because Malchus compared to speech. He spoke and it came into being, as we say in the Psalms. Okay. Now also says the world was created through kindness.
Whoa.
So that the creation takes place through the word of the God and the breath of his mouth, which becomes a vessel and a garment for the creative inner attribute of kindness, of love. Meaning, I'm not explaining how this works, but we're going to accept some axioms here. God and his attributes are one. Okay. And even as it comes through the attribute of God's speech, it's still one with God, and therefore it's still not, there's not enough, there's no room for any type of finite perspective. It's still, everything's kind of flowing from infinite source. Let's say kindness to create, and it goes even through speech. It's still God. It's still extensions of God, so it's got to be infinite. Like they give the example, the snail, whose garment is an integral component of the body, right? Our clothes are external to us, but the snail, his shell grows from him. So in a way, it covers him, but it's also what's covering it. He's covering himself.
Mm.
That's why there's an example where if someone is wearing a yarmulke and they want to make a blessing, they can't put their hand on top of their head as a temporary covering, because you're covering yourself with yourself. That doesn't work like that.
Mhm.
It's still yourself.
Mhm.
So therefore, you have to either. I think I've seen you put your hand on someone else puts their hand on your head, or use your your
Yeah, your cloth,
cloth or something.
Your clothes.
I mean, it's just an example. Why this metaphor is just telling us how even if God were to use all the attributes, which God does, but it's still there's no room for any limitation yet because all those attributes are infinite.
Wow.
However, how does it work? The Holy One, blessed be, contracted the light and life force that could diffuse from the breath of his mouth and then goes through further filters, invests them in the combinations of the letters of the 10 utterances and the combination of their combinations. By substitutions and transpositions of the letters themselves, as well as their gematria, their numerical values and equivalents. Basically, we only have 10 utterances for creation, but there's like trillions of creations. How does that work? So you take those words and then you do types of codes and transpositions and number games, whatever number formulas. You can get to any word, or any you can get from those original 10, let's say, utterances to things that are not in the 10, but they're still very real creations.
Trillions.
Yeah. And all that type of substituting the letters and to numbers and whatever, all those formula indicates the descent of the light and life force degree by degree. It's all it symbolizes the diffusing the light, the infinite light, into more finite specifics.
Mm-hmm.
So that it will be able to create and give life to creatures whose quality and significance is lower than the quality and significance of the creatures created from the very letters and words of the 10 utterances. It will give life to creatures whose quality and significance is lower, and the quality and significance of the creatures within which is enclosed the Holy One, blessed be in his glory and essence, which are his attributes. Okay, and the numerical value indicates the progressive diminution of the light and life force until there remains from it only the final level, which is that of the sum and number of kinds of powers and grades contain the light and life force invested in a particular letter, combination of a particular word. You'll give an example in a minute. It is only after all these contractions and others like them that God's wisdom has ordained that the life force can invest itself even in the lower created beings, such as inanimate stones and dust, in which no life force at all is revealed. For example, the name Evan. So in general, we say that every Hebrew, biblical Hebrew word of a thing, of anything, is reflective of its life force. How? Because let's say the word Evan, stone, which means a rock, indicates that its source in the divine name Ban, which is the numerical equivalent of 52, which is a spelling out of Havaya in a certain way, equal 52. Yet through numerous and powerful, now the name Ban is a name, it's a name of God, it's some type of revelation. In its pristine state, it's a revelation. A stone, you don't see a revelation of God. How do you get from the source, where it's this big revelation of God, and now it's a rock? Through numerous and powerful contractions, degree by degree, from higher to lower worlds, you're descended from it a life force so exceedingly diminished that it could clothe itself in a stone. And this very great condensed life force is the soul of the inanimate being, which gives it life and brings into existence ex nihilo at every instance, as has been explained previously. This greatly condensed life force is the level of he who fills all the world, the Mamali Kalaman, the filler of the world. It's how God gives tapered filling to every energy, filling up every individual specific thing on its level, as opposed to the level of Soivev, of where God's transcended. Everything is equally irrelevant to that aspect of God. So, in summary, the divine life force can create worlds that are infinite in quantity and quality. How do we have finite beings? Through the life force going through all types of filters of which is the metaphor of an original word. You want to get to other words, you do transpositions or numerical equivalents, etc., until you get from the original word to a much more disguised version of it, which represents the life force going through all types of filters to create specifics.
Wow.
Each power and grade of the life force is able to create now beings according to its own level, even unlimited in quantity and quality, giving them everlasting life. Since it is the power of God that diffuses and emanates from the breath of his mouth, and there is no restraint to his ability to create unlimited worlds. Their quality, however, will not be on a level as high as the quality and level of the creatures, which can be created from the power and degree of the letters themselves. So it ends off here a little bit confusing to me. Can a rock create anything further? To me, it sounds like it could, because even though it's diminished, there's a certain level of, it's still part of, from God. So just like God is endless, even a rock, even the diminished, final version of it is still able to create further. But what does that mean? A rock creates? This is my own understanding.
You can transform that rock with energy, if you like,
Okay.
into its constituents. Some of it might be precious metals. Some of
Okay.
it may be, other kinds of material molecules. But I don't see the rock has any kind of a source of intention inside it. No.
I don't know if that's done intention, but could theoretically, can anything create further?
I don't know what you mean by create
I don't
further.
either.
What does the Hebrew say?
Here's the translate. Each power and level of life force can create creatures in accordance with that level.
The Hebrew would be more.
So I take it back. I think
transparent.
it's saying the life force of the rock can give life force to other rocks. Not to say the rock can create, but maybe the life force. We say everything is a life force, even to exist. Not just to be animated, but even to exist, it needs a life force. So the life force, though, is a very diminished one because it goes through all types of filters to get to a finite, projection outcome. So that life force, I think maybe it's that life force that's able to create, theoretically endless rocks.
Can you read the sentence again? Rabbi, can you read the sentence again?
It's not going to help.
Can I hear?
Okay, just to finish off again, each power and level of life force can create creatures in accordance with that level, even without limit in their quantity and quality to sustain them for eternity. Since it is the force of God that issues and emanates from the breath of his utterance, there's no constraint in him. So even though God's weak breath, after going through all types of filters, it still can create something. It can create theoretically endless rocks. Yet the quality of that breath of God will not be as high as grade as the quality and creative creations that could be created from the power and level of the letters themselves. Thus, we finish understanding how the God, we set out to understand how everything is one with God. And we explained it in the past 7 chapters to the best of our ability, how there's a higher level unity and a lower level unity. Both are unified entirely with God, but there's only oneness of God. Meaning, What I remember, what I take away is imagine characters in a book in your mind, right? So that from the perspective of the mind, there's nothing else in the mind. Even if there's characters, you're thinking this, you're thinking that. But I imagine those characters could have perspective. They would feel, let's say, independent. But we know that their only existence, even in their independence, which explains how that works with the transcendent light and then the diffused light, even that is only part of God. And how is that done? Through the tzimtzum, which is the great secret of contraction, how God can. We also take the view of the Kabbalists, most of the Kabbalists, that the tzimtzum is not literal. God's withdrawal wasn't literal. It just, I guess it highlighted that God wants finite beings to have perspective, but even that is only due to God. So we explain how everything, even our perspective of independence, that also is part of God. And therefore everything is one. The rest of this second book, the last five or six chapters, we'll talk about what does it mean. This is Gary's big question, or someone asked this. What does it mean the 10 sfirot are 10 but 1? Aren't they a composite? Isn't God having a composite of the 10 sfirot, the 10 creative energies?
What's composite?
Made up of parts. So doesn't it seem like now, if you're saying there's 10 sfirot that create, and those are all God's attributes, and how is that not a composite? Stay tuned. We'll get to that.